Last year, on the night of February 23rd to 24th, President Vladimir Putin delivered a propaganda address to citizens in which he explained his decision to launch an invasion. In the morning, Ukrainians heard the first explosions, and at around 8 a.m. Polish time, land formations of the Russian army crossed into Ukraine. I turn now to you, Ukrainian soldier, rescuer of Ukrainians, helper of the nation. I thank everyone who has endured this cruel year. And at this point, I want to say to all of you who are fighting for Ukraine and living with it in your heart, I am proud of you. We are all proud of you. Let this pride of ours go through the streets, trenches, cities, through hearts and through countries. Let it speak everywhere. Ukraine is alive. Russian troops numbered 100,000 when the invasion began. The coordinated attack came from four main directions: from southern Belarus to the Kiev region, from the northeast into Kharkiv region, from the Russian separatist-controlled part of Donbass toward Dnipro and Zaporizhia, and from the south toward Odessa. The Russians were most concerned with capturing the capital and thus paralyzing the Ukrainian power apparatus. To this end, in addition to a ground offensive, they attempted to launch a landing from more than 20 helicopters at the Hostomel airfield near Kiev. The commanders have not shown off their finesse at either the strategic, operational, or tactical level. The troops are badly commanded. The commanders are not leaders. The subdivisions of Wagner and Kadyrov, which were supposed to make a breakthrough on operational activities, also failed. Already in April, the Ukrainians demonstrated their ability to counteroffensive by recapturing part of the Kharkiv region. The full counteroffensive began in September. At that time, the authorities in Kiev recaptured the Kharkiv region and by November 11th pushed the Russians beyond the Dnieper and entered Kherson. Since December, the situation on the front has not changed significantly. The Ukrainians have been training for years, whether at Western military universities or under the tutelage of Western instructors. They gradually took over Western-made equipment, perfected their own, applied the fighting methods, tactics, and operational art of the NATO army, and this had the effect that they were able to put up effective resistance to the Russians on that very 24th of February last year. The UN reports that since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, more than 7,000 civilians have been killed and more than 11,500 wounded. The Russians have repeatedly violated human rights and violated the laws of war. Places particularly marked by Russian atrocities are Bucha, Izium, Irpin, and Borodyanka. Ukrainian services are still working to determine the exact scale of Russian barbarism. Trenches stretching for tens of kilometers, positions of military dugouts, assaults on a regular basis with Ura screaming Russians. This is the reality not only of 1945, but also of 2022. Welcome, dear people, to the 21st century. In the last days of September last year, the occupation authorities held illegal referendums on the annexation of the Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions to Russia. Under the rigged plebiscites, Russia took away more than 15% of Ukraine's territory. The annexed Zaporizhia is home to a nuclear power plant that has been repeatedly shelled by the Russians. Its damage may have led to nuclear contamination. This does not change the fact that the Russians have not yet shown the full potential of their capabilities. Russia is a very powerful country. The nation is a nation largely stupefied by propaganda, unfortunately. Unless there is some kind of palace coup and someone brings it about, not Putin of course, but that whole Putin clique loses power, I would rather expect that these scenarios which are related to the escalation of the war will be very seriously considered, perhaps even implemented. The world is talking about a year of heroic resistance by Ukrainians, but they themselves insist that their war began on February 20th in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. In turn, a month and a half later, Moscow-backed pro-Russian separatists launched the war in Donbass. Historians have no doubt the full-scale invasion of Ukraine is a continuation of Moscow's imperial policies, which the heirs of the Soviet Union have never renounced.